Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning. Welcome to Carolina This Week. This is Jay Jordan. He's running for the 7th Congressional District seat. He's out of Florence, and he's a Republican. We'll talk to him in just a minute. We're also on this Marathon Sunday. We'll be talking about Myrtle Beach Race Week a little bit later on. But first, let's get down to politics. Jay Jordan, thanks for coming in this afternoon.
No, glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Tim.
First off, the question I try to ask just about everybody out of the gate is, who are you and why are you running for this seat?
Well, I'm someone, honestly, the short answer is I'm frustrated with the way our government, the direction our government's going and has been going. You know, I certainly never saw myself as someone who would run for politics or get involved in politics at this level, certainly not Congress. But I think it's a demonstration of the frustration of myself as well as a lot of other folks in our area and our country that just say it's not that complicated to go to Washington and do the right thing. Government has done things it has no business doing, and now we find ourselves in a position where if citizens don't take ownership over the process, we're going to continue to have worse and worse problems as we go forward.
Just this past week, or actually it was I guess a couple weeks ago, a report came out that the Congressional Approval rating is again at its lowest point ever. I think it was 11, now it's down to around 10. You might be popular in this area going to Washington, but once you get there, you may not be so popular with the rest of the American people. Is this a job that you think, is this a job you have thick enough skin to handle?
Well, I think it's that number is a good, I think it's pretty accurate. Folks are just really frustrated with the direction of our country, and they're looking for a reason why. And as someone, like I said, who's never run for office, I found myself asking the question, why is it like this? Why does our government ignore basic principles that every individual, family, and business are forced to live by, but our government seems to not have those same responsibilities? And I think that's why you see the frustration among so many Americans. Now, it's a process that you do have to have a thick skin. I'm learning that, and that's fair because you're stepping out on that ledge and saying, I believe I'm the right person for this job. So you should have a thick skin, and you should welcome questions, and you should welcome constructive criticism because everyone has their own ideas. But at the end of the day, if we work together, I think we can find the right ideas.
Let's talk about some of the issues that will affect the Grand Strand and PD in Washington. I think the biggest one is probably I-73 that gets talked about a lot. How do you view I-73? Is this something that is needed for the Grand Strand and PD, or is this something that we shouldn't be spending time or money on at this point?
You know, it's hard to believe that I-73 is still a discussion. It's been a discussion for so long. And you talk about need. I don't think many people would disagree with me that it is a tremendous need for our area. Our area has grown in population. This congressional district is a demonstration of that growth in population. That's why we have a 7th congressional district. Unfortunately, the infrastructure in our area has not kept up at the pace with the population. 73 is a tremendous opportunity for this district, and all the counties that it will touch and the counties around the proposed path of the interstate. You know, South Carolina is a great place to live. We see, as we're seeing with people coming into our state, and this area in particular of South Carolina, and we have a great head start as far as our tourism industry. Now we need to do a better job of attracting industry, and I-73 is a great vehicle to do that and begin that process. Now I will say this, government has a nasty habit of everything it touches, it finds a way to waste money. We need to be smarter in how we approach projects like I-73. But at the end of the day, this is a responsibility of government. You know, government has a responsibility to do things like infrastructure. Government has spent so much time and energy and money doing things it shouldn't be doing that now we're having to discuss, do we have money for things that we should be doing, like infrastructure? So we need to do it, but we need to do it in the right way. That means we need to look for cheaper ways, more efficient ways to build projects, whether you're 73 or any other road for that matter, whether it's $1 million road or $1 billion road. And we can do that. We can look at other states. There's some states that have been successful in paying for infrastructure in the right way, and some states have done it the wrong way. We need to look at those states that have done it the right way and then try and employ those methods so that we meet our needs for our community, but at the same time we don't continue to give such a financial burden. You know, I talk about 73 and I say, you know, we're going to ride on it and our kids are going to pay for it. So we have an obligation and responsibility to the next generation as well.
I also want to ask you about a couple laws that are coming out of Washington that are affecting tourism on the Grand Strand, or some of the business operators on the Grand Strand. One we just talked about a couple weeks ago is they both do with pools. One is about pool enclosures.
Right.
FEMA says that you have to have enclosures to cover, not glass enclosures covering pools, like a lot of hotels do on the Grand Strand. Then there's another one that says that swimming pools, to be compliant with the ADA, have to have lifts or some kind of sloped entry. Both these rules can dramatically impact a lot of people along the Grand Strand. Are these rules necessary? Are these rules and these type of rules something that you would go to bat for the business owners?
You know, Washington, and those are examples, or great examples, of how Washington has employed a philosophy in the last several decades. They're great at talking and telling us what we need to do all across the country, but they're very poor at listening. They create rules and regulations every day that they're not, it's sort of a one-size-fits-all mentality for Washington nowadays. They make rules and laws that apply across the country, but then they don't think about the repercussions of those type rules and regulations that you just mentioned here in South Carolina. A noble rationale behind it, but completely off base as far as the implementation, the cost associated with it, and the benefit for it. There's really very limited benefit for what you're talking about there, and tremendous cost associated with it. So that's a perfect example of things we need to be fighting against up in Washington.
What other projects do you see as something you would either champion or try to derail if you went to Washington on behalf of the people of the PD and Grand Strand?
Well, the big thing we need to recognize and get our hands around is we have a debt that is growing at a rate that is unbelievable. You know, $15 trillion in debt is a number that I think is unimaginable to most people, increasing at $3.96 billion a day. That's our first and foremost responsibility. We've got to get that under control. We've got to send folks to Washington who are not politicians, who are not looking to keep a job, who are recognize they're there for a specific purpose to serve the people of their district and their country, and have the courage and conviction to make difficult decisions and live by that. You know, I'm someone who's a very strong believer in term limits. That's what I'm going around talking. That's what I started talking about at my announcement. I believe that's a reasonable, rational way for us to begin the process of cutting the debt. You can't ignore the statistics that the longer someone stays in Washington, the more money they spend.
If you're elected, how many terms would you seek?
I've already self-imposed a maximum of 3 terms on myself.
6 years.
That's correct. The numbers are pretty clear that the 6-year mark, once you get past that, the graph goes almost vertical in the spending. I didn't need a poll to tell me that term limits were popular. It's just the right thing to do, and that's why I talked about it from day one.
Okay. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the broader national issues like health care, military, our involvement in the Middle East, and some other stuff. We'll be right back with Jay Jordan, who's running for the 7th Congressional District. Welcome back to Carolina This Week. Republican Jay Jordan, who's running for the 7th Congressional District, is joining us now. You're out of Florence. I want to talk a little bit about the PD versus the Grand Strand in this race. This is pretty unique. We haven't had a united district like this in quite a long time. Not only do you have to fight the Republican versus Democrat battle that every politician has to fight, but this time, do you think that there's going to be a battle between the PD and the Grand Strand as to who ultimately wins this seat?
That's a fair question. I think that's going to, I think it's less so than people think probably. You know, this is an opportunity really more than anything. As you said, this is a district that's been created from 3 other districts essentially. And I think we're all looking to have a new congressional district that reflects the entire district. You know, whoever is a representative, I hope it's me, but whether it's someone from, or whether it's whoever's serving, they're going to represent the folks of Chesterfield all the way down to the folks of Horry. And I think having a district that is a creation of other districts will sort of bring us together and give us a chance to have a common goal, because we are very similar. You know, this district, Florence is geographically near the middle of it, but you can go, it's not that big of a district. You can be at one side or the other within a couple hours. And they're good people on both ends of that drive. So I think there's less differences there than people think.
Jobs in the economy, obviously a big issue, not only here in our area, but all over the country. And I don't have to tell you that the PD has really suffered harder than most areas with unemployment. We have seen some businesses open there, but of course a lot more needs to be done to bring the astronomically high numbers in places like Marlboro County back into some kind of reasonable, manageable situation. What would you do to grow the economy of the PD and Grand Strand for that matter, and bring more jobs to the area?
Well, I talked about that a little bit earlier. We all need to be sort of pulling in the right direction. The areas that are attracting industry, and I say that attracting industry because it's competitive. You know, every time we talk about industry coming to our area, what do we talk about? We talk about we're competing with another state, whether it's Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, all these other states that are in the Southeast. We're competing with these other areas. So we have to have, as a collective body, we need to be pulling in the right direction. We need to make ourselves, first and foremost, we need to set the table in the right way. That means things like infrastructure, things that attract industry. They need infrastructure to get their product in and out of our area. Education, we need to be making our workforce more and more educated so that we have the right kind of folks that are prepared when that industry does come to our area. You know, as I said, South Carolina is a great place to live. We see that through the population increase. We can do things to make ourselves more appealable to industry. And then the second part of that is, it's not enough to just say we have a great place to bring your industry. We need to go out and tell them about it. And we're doing a better job of that. We've got areas, Horry's doing a good job, Florence, other counties are doing a good job of going out and attracting and saying, this is why you need to come to our area. It's a great place to do business, and you're welcome here, and you're going to get a good group of people to work for you.
Let's talk about health care, another big issue. What would you do as far as if a vote came down to it to repeal Obamacare? Apparently this is going to have to be done piecemeal if it is done at all. Is that something you would want to actively pursue, and which parts would you go after first?
We've got to repeal Obamacare. I mean, there's just no two ways around it. Something that has the potential to continue to have such a negative side effect and consequence on our economy. Putting the government requirement, you know, on the job producers is going to eliminate jobs, and it's going to essentially create more individuals without health care. You know, everyone should have access to health care. We live in an advanced country. You know, no one should be denied health care based on lack of funds. But it's the government going into businesses and telling them they're required to provide it is going to have the exact opposite consequence that it's intended to have. So we've got to do everything we can to begin the process. I said begin the process. Like you said, it's not something that we can just, we're going to have the ability to just wipe off the books. We've got to begin the process to get rid of it one piece at a time.
We are seeing our troops coming home in bigger numbers than they have in a long time. We're out of Iraq for the most part.
Yeah.
We are a deadline of 2013, tentative deadline of 2013 for bringing troops home from Afghanistan. What should America's role be overseas? Should we stay in Afghanistan? Should we have left Iraq? Should we be going into Syria? Or how should we be approaching foreign policy?
Well, we've got to first recognize that there are a lot of people in this world that don't like us or our way of life. We have to recognize that. If we're going to, what I call, stand up for what's right, we've got to be willing to accept that. We have friends that we've made alliances with across the globe. We've got to honor those friendships. At the same time, we've got to be very careful to not get ourselves in conflicts that we can't avoid, but at the same time, not run from them either. We have the greatest military in the history of the world. We have the most well-trained military in the history of the world. We need to do a better job of listening to that military leadership when it comes to how we approach going in and how we develop the plan of getting out of these areas. But at the same time, never run from our obligations, but always look at them as responsibilities that should never be entered lightly.
If the vote came down to it, you were serving in the House, and they said, we think Iran has a nuclear weapon, we want to send in a in an invading force. I don't know how big that would be or how it would go. Is that something, would that be a tough decision for you to make?
That would be one of the toughest decisions I think anyone serving in our Congress would have to deal with. You know, I had a good friend that he just left to go serve in overseas, left his family, and he won't be back till almost Thanksgiving. And he's going and risking his life for our country. That should be the soberest of moments when we vote, when a congressman or woman votes on that particular issue. Now, having said that, that is a very dangerous possibility of that we're dealing with over in Iran, and we need to deal with that very carefully, but very specifically. A nuclear-armed Iran is dangerous not just for the folks in that area, our friends included, but for us. So we need to understand that that there are consequences affected. They're present there, not run from them, but be very careful with them as well.
Okay. Last question for you. You probably know what it is, but why should I vote for you?
Well, Tim, if you're looking for a conservative in this race, I'm the conservative. I'm not a conservative. I'm the conservative in this race. I was the first candidate. It was important to me when I started talking, when I announced I was going to run. I started talking about things like term limits, things like a balanced budget amendment, and things that I wasn't just talking about. I was willing to sign on the dotted line because I do believe in term limits. So I self-imposed term limits. I'm the only candidate in this race that has said I won't participate in the Congressional Retirement Program because it's wrong to serve for 5 years, invest in a retirement program that's paid for by taxpayers. I'm the conservative candidate in this race, and if that's something you're looking for, just like other folks out there, I'd be happy to have the privilege of having your vote.
All right. Jay Jordan, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Tim.
We'll be right back.